Shana Tova, Gemar Chatima Tova. Grateful to be together for Yom Kippur. A couple of years ago, my father was diagnosed with a rare form of muscular dystrophy. It's called myotonic dystrophy type 2. The disease triggers a progression of deterioration. There is no cure, nor is there any medication that can slow the disease process, at least not yet. The disease is also genetic. Anyone who has the biological markers for myotonic dystrophy will ultimately develop the disease. So when my father learned of his diagnosis, it triggered a question in me. Am I a carrier for that disease? I decided to test and find out what my fate would be. The waiting process was excruciating. I spent about 2 months living in the not knowing. I found myself trying to predict the future. Every time a muscle would ache, I would wonder, is it a sign? I would visit every website I could find to see if I could game out the conclusion. I asked myself, is it taking so long to get results because it's positive? Is the fact that I haven't heard yet back a sign that it's negative? The truth is, there was nothing I could do to discern the future. It just wasn't knowable. And during that time, I found that life was swirling around me, but I wasn't really in it. I wasn't present with my kids. I couldn't focus on the books I was reading or the shows I was watching. I was so busy trying to predict the future that I lost track of the present. After weeks of not knowing, eventually the results came. I'm thankfully not a carrier for the disease. And while that news is certainly a relief, I still lost 8 weeks of my life, mired in the muck of attempting to foresee a future that I cannot discern. We all live with vast uncertainty. And the truth is, on a good day, it's hard, and on a bad day, it's gut-wrenching. From this entire year for the Jewish people has been gut-wrenching. From last Yom Kippur to this one, we had no idea what lay ahead. We couldn't predict it. From this Yom Kippur to the next, the same is true. We can't see the future. Will the war end? We can't predict. Will the hostages come home? We don't know. Will something worse happen? Will a miraculous peace descend? There's no crystal ball. It's just not knowable. The question becomes, how do we live in the not knowing? How can we survive and even thrive when we can't anticipate what lies ahead? This Yom Kippur, you might be asking yourself, will I get sick this year? Will my loved one survive her disease? Will he stay in remission? Will she heal? We can't know. You might be asking yourself, will I lose my job? Will she land on her feet? Will he find a partner? Will I have a child? We can't know. You might be asking yourself, who will win this election? Will I be safe? How will Israel survive? Will anti-Semitism get even worse? We can't know. Yom Kippur is designed to remind us that we can't prophesy the future. The Unatana Tokef, a prayer that for so many of us represents the very essence of the day, is famously a list of questions, not answers. Mi yichya u'mi yamut, who will live and who will die? Who will be serene and who will be troubled? We don't know. And more precisely, we can't know. And yet, we are not stumbling in the dark. The Torah gives us a roadmap for how to live in the not knowing. And it's a roadmap we need, most especially on Yom Kippur. Each book of the Torah embodies a wise answer to our Yom Kippur question. How can we live lives of dignity, joy, and goodness, even and especially when faced with intractable uncertainty? The first answer comes from the book of Genesis, from Breshit. In Breshit, we learn how the first Jews, Avram and Sarah, confronted a future they couldn't foretell. God says to Avraham, Lech lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladetecha u'mbeit avicha el ha'aretz asher areka. Go from your nation, from your birthplace, from your ancestral home to a land that I'll show you. Avraham and Sarah leave behind everything they know. Avraham and Sarah can't predict the future. What will it be like in their new home? Will they survive the journey? What challenges will await them? They can't know. And how do they survive that uncertain fate? By relying on what is unchanging: faith and family. That's it. Though their surroundings change, and their circumstances change, and their home changes, their faith stays the same. Avraham and Sarah rely on a belief in God and in God's vision for unity and goodness. Their values are steady and strong. And Avraham and Sarah rely on something else that's steady and strong: each other. Avraham journeys with his wife. Sarah journeys with her husband. Who will they encounter along the way? What will transpire? They can't know. But they know they will face the future with God, and they know they will face the future together. When life is churning around us, Breshit teaches us to turn our focus on to what is consistent: the values that drive us and the people we love. My colleague Adina described a yoga practice which reflects the same wisdom. When Adina stretches her limbs into an inherently unstable position, her teacher has taught her to focus on jushti, the Sanskrit word for an unmoving point in the distance, something reliable. Adina often trains her eye to zero in on a glint of light on the doorknob. In her words, it feels like a lifeline. We survive the unknown by focusing on a steady light in the distance, the values and the people that don't change. Adina has lovingly nicknamed her boyfriend Jushti. He's the steady point on which she can rely, even when life swirls unpredictably around her. When I was awaiting the results of that genetic test, that's what pulled me through. Disease or not, I could rely on faith and family. Myotonic dystrophy would not change my values, nor would it take away my children, my husband, my sisters, my parents, my friends. When Yom Kippur reminds us that the future is unknowable, Breshit tells us to focus on one steady point of light, to remind ourselves of what won't change, to look towards the people and the ideas that are our jushti. The second book of the Torah, Exodus, Shmot, offers a different path. In Shmot, the Jewish people are living in impossible uncertainty. Will the Pharaoh relent and set us free from Egyptian bondage? Will his heart remain hard so that yet another generation will be reared as slaves? They couldn't know. And how did our ancestors navigate a mysterious and enigmatic future? By focusing on what they could control, not their fate, but their actions. The enslaved people of Egypt could not sway the Pharaoh. The enslaved people of Egypt could not force God's hand, but they could take action. When told to do so, what did we do with that uncertainty? We slaughtered lambs, marked our doorposts with blood, baked matzah, and packed our bags. That's what we did. We did everything in our power and control, limited as it might be, to exert order on the chaos. We can't know what lies ahead, but we can know that we've done everything possible. We can take action to be the best version of ourselves, not because we know the outcome, but because we move forward nevertheless. I spoke with a friend this year who was in a precarious situation at his job. Let's call him Charlie. Charlie didn't know if his position would be eliminated. Charlie didn't know how he would provide for his family if he was out of work. Charlie couldn't predict the future. So what did Charlie do? How did he survive the agony of the unknown? He focused on what he could control and what he could do. He updated his resume. He started networking. He got a certificate in a new job skill. And, meanwhile, he washed his kids' clothes and stocked the pantry. And he and his wife started seeing a couples counselor to strengthen their marriage. He reminded himself that he's not powerless. He took the wheel. Yom Kippur is about taking the wheel. That's the essence of tshuva. We cannot know if we will be forgiven, but we can make amends. We cannot know if we will finally change, but we can make an accountability plan. We cannot know if the world at large will be lighter, but we can choose to shine light in our little corner. When Yom Kippur reminds us that we can't control the future, Shemot tells us we can control our choices. Following Breshit and Shemot, the remaining 3 books of the Torah, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Devarim, all take place neither in Egypt nor in the Promised Land, but rather in between. The vast majority of the Jewish tradition unfolds in the desert, in the unpredictable wanderings of an unknowable future. That's who we are. We know how the story ends, but they didn't. Our ancestors didn't know if they would survive. They didn't know who they would become. They couldn't see the future. And they could have spent the whole time focused on that murky destiny. But if they did, they would have missed out on life itself. The Torah isn't only about leaving Egypt and entering Israel. It's about who we became along the way. In the Midbar, in the wilderness, so much happened. The Torah was given on Mount Sinai. Gender equity for inheritance rights was proposed and ratified. A donkey spoke back to a sorcerer. A pit opened up to swallow up a band of rebels. In the Midbar, in the wilderness, we lost precious souls. The high priest Aaron, the prophet Miriam, our Redeemer Moshe. In the Midbar, in the wilderness, babies were born, and people fell in love, and leaders were formed. The Torah teaches us that life is more than waiting for an unknown future. Life is sacredly and breathtakingly unfolding before our eyes right now, right here, in the present. How did those who came before us survive and thrive in the unknown? by taking stock not of what might be, but of what is. On April 8th of 2024, we did not know what would happen in Israel or Gaza. On April 8th, we couldn't predict who would become the next president of the United States. On April 8th, just like today, October 12th, the future was impossibly and painfully unknown. But on April 8th, many of us stopped guessing about the future for just a moment and looked up at the sky. There was a solar eclipse. The stunningly black orb of the sun, sparkling with jewel-bright spots in a smoky sky, was indescribably striking. Many Anshe Emet members headed down to Carbondale to watch from the heavens. I know, I tried to recruit you people to come to a program and no one was here. I myself was lost in thought. And then, as I walked into shul, I saw a group of staff and congregants standing in the parking lot with dark glasses on, staring up at the sky and smiling. Someone offered me a pair of shades. I put them on, I looked up, and for a few blissful moments, I was rooted in the present. My shoulders relaxed, I felt my feet on the ground, my brain cleared. I said a bracha. We can't predict what will happen in the future, but we can gratefully attend to what's happening right in front of us. When Yom Kippur reminds us that what lies ahead is unknowable, Vayikra b'midbar devarim, call out to us, shift your gaze, focus on what you do know. As Mary Oliver says, this one wild and unpredictable life is happening now. Our tradition tells us that the book of life and death is being written today. The tradition tells us that the gates of heaven are closing tonight. And the tradition tells us we don't get to see the book. We don't get to see. We're not going to know. We don't know what the future holds on the other side of those gates. We can't know. Yom Kippur forces us to acknowledge the truth that we run from all the rest of the year. The future is unknowable. As we stand facing a year we can't predict, may this Yom Kippur fortify us with the tools to survive and thrive in the not knowing. May we confidently cling to that which is stable and eternal, faith and family. May we audaciously take the wheel, committing to do all we can to make life better and to make ourselves better. May we feel our feet on the ground and root our consciousness not in the unknown future, but in the immeasurable blessing of the present. It may be fleeting, but it is so beautiful. Gemar Chatima Tova, may we be sealed for a good life. We cannot predict when or how our lives will be sealed, but we can choose to seal our lives with goodness, good relationships, good actions, and good grounding. Today that choice is ours. Let's contemplate what kind of a year we want to have as we turn to the Musaf Amidah. Please rise if you're able. The silent Amidah begins on page 299 and concludes on page 311.